If you look out here in the water, you know, there was some buoys set up to designate a swimming area, and that would have been her primary area of focus. That was a designated swimming area at that time. You know, right around 10 o'clock, it's 10:30 now. So when Molly would have shown up, it would be pretty accurate to what we see right now. Nice and quiet like this, with the exception of a couple fishermen. From all accounts and the information that we know, she was gone within minutes of her arrival. My name is Mike Mcdonald. I'm a trooper with the State Police Detectives for Worcester County, an investigator for the Unresolved Case Unit. Worcester County, we have approximately 60 unresolved cases, and they date back, I think the oldest one is in 1950. In my office, I have a whole wall of shelves, and it's all banker's boxes with the case file names on them. I certainly have the desire to do this work, and I've always wanted to do it. I like the challenge of looking at a case. You got to try to look at solvability factors. And so what that is, different categories, like do you have physical evidence that you can test? Do you have identified witnesses? And do you have suspects?
My name's Joe Early, Jr. I'm the district attorney for the Middle District, which really is Worcester County. I've been doing this for about 14 years. The hardest part of my job is talking to people in pain. It's something you never get used to. You're continually talking to someone in pain. You can never give them what they want, and that's their loved one back.
You're going to start going through the case file page by page. And a lot of these cases that are 20 to 30 years old, you're talking 100 to 1,000 pieces of paper and documents. And so here's a case file. It's very time consuming. You go through, you get a good understanding of the who, where, what, and when, and read all the investigative notes that you can. The Facebooks, the Instagrams, all that stuff is great tools for us.
In the DNA, the science has changed so much just since I got into office. You know, and there's different elements of the DNA, whether it be touch DNA. There's always talk about familial DNA or genealogy, putting it into a system and see if you get a hit to a relative. These things, they're changing every day. Not long after we got the cold case unit started, I remember being out at the Molly Bish Center at Anna Maria College. And John Bish, Molly's father, said to us, "Don't you dare," and he really chastised us. He said, "Don't you dare call this a cold case unit." Because cold case unit means they're cold cases. They're sitting on a file somewhere collecting dust. And that's not what they are. We know you're working. The families know you're working on these cases every day. But by calling them cold, it means they're not being worked on. So I would suggest you call them unresolved. And so ever since then, it's been unresolved homicide unit.
Some items of Molly's that we got from the state police. There's some cassette tapes. What was my favorite was the American Tail, the 5-0 movie. Molly loved that song Somewhere Out There. But she liked the Beach Boys, New Kids on the Block, so you can tell how old these are. My name is Heather Bish. I was 23 when Molly disappeared. I have a brother who's 3 years younger than me, and Molly was 3 years younger than John. Some days, it's like yesterday that she was gone, taken. And other days, yeah, I can feel the time. I wonder, you know, what she would be doing. You know, who would her friends be? Just loved by her friends. This was one of her very best friends, Erin. I absolutely think Molly's case is solvable. I think that we have a really strong, dedicated Mass State Police unit. I think that they have worked incredibly hard, and I do believe there is that one piece out there. I do believe that people have come forward in cases across the country and been brave enough to say, you know, I wasn't comfortable saying this before, my relationship changed, or this changed, or, you know, I remembered this. Molly loved baby dolls, so she always had some sort of doll with her. It's just nice to have pieces of Molly back. Her ID from school, especially right now when things are so sad and scary. It's nice to have these little mementos and think about her and the things that she loved and enjoyed doing and the people that she loved.
I took over the Molly Bish investigation in 2018. It was June 27, 2000. It was just before 10 a.m. Molly gets dropped off at Commons Pond, which is a small pond in Warren, Massachusetts. She recently secured a job as a lifeguard there. She walks away from her mother's vehicle in the parking lot, goes to the shed to get her equipment, and is never seen again. There was some swim lessons that were going on that morning, and as people arrived, the question was, where's the lifeguard? Eventually, Warren Police was contacted, and they were advised, hey, listen, the lifeguard, her equipment and chair are here, but she's not. At first, the thought was, hey, is she somewhere in the water? And that's where they kind of focused their attention. Once they were able to kind of determine that that wasn't the case, that's when it started to shift.
We won't give up hope until we find her.
I was actually in Westfield, Massachusetts, which isn't far from Warren, attending college. I remember all the news reports, and initially it was a missing lifeguard that they weren't sure if something had happened there at the pond or something more sinister had happened. Cut to 2003, there's a hunter that is up in Whiskey Hill area, which is in Palmer, Mass. He tells a friend of his that he had seen a bathing suit or some kind of piece of clothing up there. The individual that he tells has a little bit of knowledge about the case and says, hey, you know, that could be related. So then he notifies law enforcement. They go, secure the bathing suit. They do a subsequent search of that area, and her remains were located 3 years later from the original date. Shortly after this happened, the Bish family went out and they were very proactive. They were really instrumental in the Amber Alert system and getting that up and running. And so they've always been at the forefront in making sure that Molly's case isn't forgotten about.
Molly was my third child, the youngest in our family. She was very wanted and loved.
There's a lot of obstacles in front of these guys who are doing this work, particularly with older cases. It's really frustrating for all of us, and you know, I guess that's why I keep trying to think of new ways to generate what we're missing. What is it that we don't see, that we aren't connecting, that we don't know? I have just a couple podcast equipment things here to help me share my story about Molly.
She had a really kind heart.
I've been working so hard on trying to keep the story alive, or doing these tip campaigns and trying to generate that one piece that they keep talking about is all that they need. I had to buy a microphone to start. I forgot what this thing is, but it helps with the sound. And then I just had to download a program called Audacity. That's really how easy it is to set up a podcast. I think that someone had the opportunity and they found a way, and they must have known the area. So behind where Molly was at Commons Pond, there's a cemetery and there's a trail. And there was a white car seen in that area the day Molly disappeared. So I believe someone was waiting for her, saw her set up, either faked an injury or asked her to run over, and she just jumped up.
Molly also loved to swim and became a lifeguard after John.
And somehow they got the power over her to take her. And they could easily get out to Route 19, which has access to the Mass Pike.
6 or 8 times a year, I randomly just come down and walk. You know, I've walked all the trails up here. I've walked up into the cemetery. It is a remote area. It's something that if you're not familiar with this area, you're probably not going to know it's back here. So that kind of just sticks in my mind. To me, that kind of just is indicative of someone being familiar with the area.
I do think science is also another answer. The way that we are advancing in technology, even if we can't solve Molly's case with familial DNA or anything right at this moment, 10 years from now we might be able to. I truly believe that, and I truly believe that I will get this guy someday.
The investigation is focused now on looking at evidence that was secured back in the time frame and what advances in scientific testing are available to us. What would be most probative to have reanalyzed? Can we reanalyze it? I would say for me that's at the forefront, coupled with vetting those new tips that come in.
If we're successful in extracting DNA from this bathing suit, we'll be able to do a match.
There is DNA. As our DNA capabilities advance, that's always something that we relook at. Was there an item that the quantities were really limited back then, but now a lab can do more with a lower quantity? And so was that something that maybe wasn't tested in the era of 2000, where it might be probative to take a look at now?
After 20 years, it's still being actively worked on. We get tips every week, if not every day, on that case.
Those are uploaded into a computer, a records management system, and that's when we start cross-referencing. Is this a tip that we've already received? Is this information already in our system? Is this brand new? Are these names related? Coming upon 21 years, I think that, at least portion of it is probably in the case file. It's just getting that new information that's going to put those together.
We've been so close and yet so far, as I've said from day one in this case.
I definitely think that it's a solvable case, no doubt about it. There's somebody out there that has the information, and we're optimistic that eventually we will obtain that information and be able to bring this case to a close.
You can't ever let these people think that you've given up on them. You have to give them hope. You have to let them know you're working for them, and we have to do our best to solve these cases.
The new person of interest named in the murder of Molly Bish.
It's a case that's gone unsolved for more than 20 years now at this point. Molly Bish, a 16-year-old lifeguard, vanishing in 2000.
Police have been searching for her killer for 2 decades now. So many unanswered questions for so long. So what do we know about this person of interest?
Well, we've learned that he's a convicted rapist and kidnapper, and he was one of the many individuals who was on investigators' radar over the past 21 years. Francis Frank Sumner Sr., seen here in photos. Sumner died in 2016, but investigators say they recently received a tip from an informant that links Sumner to Molly Bish's abduction and murder.
The difference with Frank Sumner is that over the years, I've been the one who's put these people of interest forward, with working with various private investigators or volunteers in our foundation. It's never been the state police that said, this is a person of interest. So this feels different for me. It feels a lot bigger and scarier.
Being able to bring justice to a family and bring answers and hold somebody responsible for the acts that they've committed, that's the ultimate goal in what we do.
I think in Molly's case, I am privileged where I have the voice. Molly was blonde and blue-eyed, and there's research that shows that young women who are of a particular look get more attention than others. And because Molly's this beautiful blonde, that I always try to recognize all those cases that don't get those privileges. Holly Peranian, Judith Chartier, Patty Gagne, Teresa Corley. There are so many unresolved cases in the state and so many families that are so important to me.
The L.J. Savella case, that's an unresolved case that we would love to bring to completion. He was a trooper with the state police. He was stationed out of the Athol barracks. This is a 1951 case. Basically, he's on patrol during a 3 to 11 shift. Passers-by see the 2 vehicles on the side of the road. The trooper was driving just an older black Buick sedan. It had 1 single light on the top of it. Witnesses see that there's 2 vehicles parked on the side of the road. The one that was in front of the trooper's vehicle was described as being shiny with white wall tires. A passerby ends up stopping and finds that the trooper is shot 7 times, and he's laying out on the ground on the passenger side of the cruiser. That was en Route 122 in Barrie, a very rural area. The thought was that he stopped for a disabled motor vehicle. There was some ballistic evidence that was secure and some fingerprints, but it wasn't like we see today. That's heavily reliant on somebody coming forward and saying, hey, I know, or I heard A, B, and C, and us kind of going out and vetting that information. This is on old typewriter paper, pretty thin. It's starting to get brittle. This is a 1952 report, and as you can see, some of the text on it over the years starts to bleed and get a little bit harder to read. So that's all the more importance to get this preserved electronically. We have so much technology that we use in current investigations, whether it's call detail records, cell phone mapping, video surveillance, all those things that you think about from a newer age case. That technology typically isn't available in these other cases. This is Shrewsbury, Massachusetts, and the property here is Worcester Sand and Gravel. And on March 28, 1981, this is where the remains of Vanessa Felder were located. She's 15 years old. She's originally from Rochester, New York. She was a 9th grader, decided that she was going to leave her residence in New York and traveled with an acquaintance that she met in New York here to Massachusetts. She'd only been here about a month. She was found with blunt trauma to her head and face and multiple stab wounds to her neck. Here's a case file for Vanessa Felder. A lot of people to try to locate and figure out where they are now. Go through the lab paperwork to see what was done back in '81, what was done in '83, and kind of try to follow the sequence of events that happened with the crime lab. There is some physical evidence that has been tested, but that is still an open case for us.